your payroll liabilities. So the same steps are true. So if you've already set up your bank account, then great, you can move on. If you haven't, if you decided that you just wanted to do paper check, then now is your time to go ahead and set up the banking information so that way you can do the easiest thing possible, which are these e-payments. So you have the option to either make the instant connection by connecting to your bank, putting in the username and password, or putting in the account number followed by the routing number. And then that's going to generate a little test deposit. And then you'll take that dollar amount and you'll verify the bank account. So easy peasy. The other thing that's going to be part of the payroll tax liability setup is making sure that you have verified the business details, the principal officer, and then those banking information details. So all of those are going to be critical in making sure that your liabilities are both filed for you and paid for you on the behalf of the client. And then the last thing that you're going to do is have an e-sign authorization form. And so what this does is this authorizes a third-party payer, which is QuickBooks Online Payroll, to file and pay on the client's behalf. And so I would recommend that you do some type of Zoom share or screen sharing with your client so that way they can have access to this form on their computer, but yet you can walk them through it. So you don't want to do it for them. You don't want to have it visible on your screen. This really is tethered to the employee, so to the employer and the principal officer. So I would recommend that you have that person sharing your screen with you so they can have help walking through it. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is that payroll tax center. So we had an area inside of QuickBooks that was the payroll center that was designed to help process payroll and in this employee related information. But now we're moving over into the section where we're going to be talking about the taxes. And so the taxes live in their own center of QuickBooks. And whenever you're thinking about the tax center, we're going to be focused on the payroll tax center. So there's lots of things that you can do inside that tax center. And you can not only manage your taxes and view those payments, but you can also, we can have access to our e-filings and see archived forms there as well. So if you're somebody who wants to have your taxes paid for you, then you're somebody who wants to have the automated taxes and forms turned on. And so what this means is part of the new reimagined payroll subscriptions is that full service is included. And what I mean by that is that all three payroll subscriptions include e-filing and e-paying for you. So there is not an additional fee. It is part of that subscription cost. So it is automatically turned on. It is automatically part of the system. But if you want to go through and you want to verify that yours is turned on and that you are going to have e-paying and e-filing done on your behalf, then you can do so by going over into the payroll settings and then going over to that taxes and forms and verifying that you have a check mark next to the automate taxes and forms. So the opposite is true. You could always turn that off, and we'll talk about some of those options here in a minute. So automated taxes and forms is really, really key to the new payroll subscriptions. So Core, Premium, and Elite all have the automated and taxes form as part of the feature set that is included in your that you can access, and that means that you're going to have the e-payments and the e-filings made on your behalf for you. And that really is beneficial, but there are some restraints. So that means that if you wanted to be able to change your payroll dates, then you might want to turn off the payroll taxes automated form filing and payment filing because you really want to have a little bit more control. So the other thing that you could do here is that you could turn it off. And so if you turned off automated taxes and forms, what you would be able to do in that scenario is then you would have control to change the date because you had turned off the full service feature and created more of a self-service environment. But the default is to have automated taxes and forms on because Intuit figured with their experience based on the client feedback that most people really want to have a full service environment. Most people don't want to be bothered by clicking the button because the button deadline sometimes passes us and now we have penalties and interest to pay. So part of your subscription is just they'll do it for you. And then what about, can you use e-services if the automated taxes and forms is turned off? And the answer to that is yes, but you will need to go through and do some payroll submitting of forms that's going to be manual. So you can use payroll and not have it automated and part of the connected to your bank account, but you're going to have more manual tasks. The other thing is what about you state that maybe does not support e-filing? I know that I live in a state that my local tax is not something that allows for e-filing. In that kind of scenario, then you would want to turn off automated taxes and forms, and you would want to submit both the state and form based on that criteria. The other part of it is if you choose to have the other parts automated, but that one piece you do on your own, you can. And so that is also an option for those local taxes. So it's not really so much on the state level, it's more of on those local county levels, parishes, those kind of things. So what about turning off the automated taxes and forms so you can file manually? Again, you're going to go back over to that gear icon that's located in the top right of QuickBooks, and you're going to select the payroll settings, navigate down to the section that says taxes and forms, and then just turn it off. And then you can see here that there's going to be a warning that says, okay, well, you're going to be responsible for paying your own taxes and forms, which is fine. You just need to be aware that that is something that you need to then manage yourself or your client needs to manage. So it's okay to turn it off, but then somebody's needs to be put on that task to make sure that it happens. The next thing that will happen whenever you go to ePay is you can go through and you can say, I've turned off the automated taxes and forms, but I still want to ePay and I want to do it manually. And so the steps to do that would be to go over into your taxes center. So on the navigation bar, you've got the taxes center and you're going to navigate down to the payroll taxes. And then from there, you're going to choose payroll taxes, and then whichever payment is due, then you would go ahead and say pay electronically. And here you would get to choose the date. So if you wanted to do it the earliest, the latest, whatever, you could have control over it and you can still e-pay. The other option is to say that really you want to do it manually and you don't even want to e-pay here by clicking the button. You could make the choice to make the payment yourself, and maybe you go file it directly on that website's liability account, and then you go back into QuickBooks and record the transaction. The other thing that you can do is sometimes whenever you're paying on your own, or sometimes just in general, you have penalties and interest. Maybe something was missed, and so now you have some type of additional liabilities that are due. So in the case of the liabilities that are the penalties and interest from possibly, let's just say, a late payment, what you would do is you would need to pay those outside of QuickBooks. And here's the reason why. At this time, there is no way inside of QuickBooks Online Payroll to adjust your liabilities. So you cannot on your own make a payroll liability adjustment. You can, however, if you do have the automated taxes and forms turned on, then you could call your support care and you could tell them, can you adjust my liability? And they could make that change for you. But if it is penalties and interest related, whether you're filing manually or automated, then the thing that you would do is you would go ahead and pay those taxes, or they would be paid for you. You would go out to the liabilities website and you would pay those penalties and interest. And then you're going to need to come back into QuickBooks and then record that expense. And so it's a separate transaction because you need to record a 2-line transaction with the penalty and interest is most often what happens. So you're going to put those details inside of QuickBooks. So it's a couple of steps. It's recording that liability payment. It's then go paying the penalties and interest on the liability website, and then coming back into QuickBooks and recording that expense of that liability penalties and interest. And so you can see that here. This is an example of going through making that payment for the payroll taxes, recording it, however, and then going and entering a separate expense transaction to capture those details. And then, I would even say a pro advisor tip would be when the bank feed comes through, if you decided to make one large payment and then instead of making 2 separate payments, you went directly over to the liability payment and made all the payment at one time. Then whenever it came in through the bank feeds, you would want to match that. So that's just kind of a tip there. The other thing is whenever you're talking about filing your payroll forms, so e-filing is going to happen for you automatically. And so with the automated taxes and forms turned on, QuickBooks Online Payroll is going to e-file your forms. So on behalf of the clients. And if the automated payroll, automated taxes and forms is turned off, then you're going to be responsible, or your client's going to be responsible for making sure that somebody processes those forms. You would be able to see those over in the forms area, and you have a couple of different options there. You can either e-submit those forms like we did with the e-payment, so you could opt to do that yourself, or you could go and file those forms outside of QuickBooks. I don't know why you would, but there are some scenarios where sometimes you need to process it outside of QuickBooks. And you do get inside of QuickBooks a worksheet. So it will help you with filling out the details. So maybe you have a scenario where you can't e-pay automatically, but QuickBooks will still give you the worksheet. Here's the data that's collected from all of your QuickBooks filings. And then you can use that worksheet to then go and file on the liability website directly. And then the other thing that you have available to you is printing archived forms. So when you go over into payroll and you're looking at those, want to view those archived forms, you can actually print them. So it's really easy to go inside of QuickBooks and look at those payroll taxes and filed forms, and then you can look at them, view them, and then decide that you want to print them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that's like. So let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see what it's like to look at archived forms. So again, we're using a demo account. So this account has got just, dummy information in it, but I'm not going to go into the payroll center. I'm actually going to navigate down here to taxes, and I'm going to select my payroll taxes. That's going to bring me directly over into the information where I can see my payments or my filings, and then I can actually view upcoming forms that would be due, or I can see archived forms. So if I wanted to look at this archived form, I could actually view this, and I could even print it. So it's going to pull it up in a PDF format that is really easy to archive. So separate tab that opens here, and then you can save that form as need be. So that I want to go ahead and launch our next poll. So I'm going to go ahead and say, where would you go to turn off automated taxes and forms? And you have the payroll settings, the account and settings, and the payroll overview. So I'll give you a second to answer that. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and count it down to 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And then the answers are the payroll settings. That's where you're going to go and you're going to edit the payroll settings. And so if I go ahead and move over into the next area, I do want to go ahead and take a minute to show you exactly where that's located, so that way you have the ability to see it as well. So gear icon, moving down over here into payroll settings. So this is where you could make those changes. All right, so year-end activities. Well, that is definitely relevant right now. So we have a couple of tasks that we need to do at year-end, and to prepare for that, we can take some actions so that way we're proactive for year-end W-2 filing. So there's a couple of pieces of information, again, that we want to make sure are up to date, and we want to go through and look at the employee information. We might want to say to our clients, did any of your employees move? Because their W-2s are going to be sent to an old address if they've moved. And then also the thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that if they have changed any of their federal or state notices or liabilities, that you've entered that in there. So on the employee information, if they've decided to have more taken out of their check, then you would want to make sure that all of those changes are submitted and entered. And then also you want to run your final annual payroll run. So go ahead and process payroll for the end of the year to make sure that all of the data is finished. And I would say give yourself a couple of days. I would not do this on December 31st, because what if there is a change? Remember, you can't change last year's information. So last part of our training, in part 1, we went over the details for voiding and deleting a paycheck. And one of the things that we covered is we cannot delete or void a prior year's paycheck. So I would give yourself enough time that if there does need to be changes, sometimes at the end of the year, our employers say, I want to be generous and give a bonus, or they forgot to tell you that they gave a cash bonus. You need to make sure that those things are entered. Yeah, they sometimes forget to give us those little nuggets. The next thing that you would do is you would want to make sure that your employees have access to their W-2s. And so the thing to do is make sure that they are invited into the workforce center, so that way they can go over and they can self-serve themselves by getting their own W-2s, by they can look at their own pay stubs. So I would look at the employee card and you can actually see, did they accept their workforce invitation? And if not, you can resubmit that to them. And if we look at where that's located, we can go over here into our employee tab, and we could look at our invite to workforce. And here we could see, here's an invite sent, and it would actually tell us if they had accepted that. And then the same thing, we could go through and we could put in employees' information, and we could drop that in and send that invite to them to make sure that we have all of the up-to-date information that's necessary to move through the end of the year tasks. One of the things that we're going to do is get ready for W-2s. So I would go through and I would actually pull payroll reports, and I would look to see, does everybody's information look right? There's actually employee detail reports that you could pull inside of QuickBooks, and so that way you could actually look to see, does all of the information look right? And maybe that's something that you would want to have your employer look at. It would have Social Security numbers on there, so you don't want to email that, but you might tell your client, pull that employee detail report and verify these details, or the total cost of payroll. Several things that you could do in reports. And we're going to look at some reports because, they're fun to look at, and that's what our clients are. They need the data. And so the way that we get the data is from the report. So preparing and submitting the W-2s. So if we think about how W-2s are going to be submitted and processed, One thing that we know is that our W-2s are going to be submitted on our behalf by Intuit, QuickBooks Online Payroll, whether it's Core, Premium, or Elite. All subscriptions are going to process those W-2s for you. That's part of that full service feature. So you do not need to send these out to employees. You don't need to mail out copies. That's actually going to be done for you on your behalf as long as you have the automated taxes and forms turned on. If you have it turned off, you're going to need to do this manually. But still, even if you decide I'm going to have the automated taxes and forms turned on, you might want to go get the archive of that data. And so the same thing that we were doing, and we were looking at that archived form for the 941, you will also have a drop-down list that will show you the W-2s once they are processed and they're ready to be able to print as needed. And so W-2s are going to be visible and ready to access January 20th. So they do not want to file, they don't want to do any changes until after January 20th, so you won't even be able to see those until after that date. And then the mailings, if you have clients who say my employees haven't received their W-2s yet in the mail and it's January 29th, that's okay. They really have to be postmarked January 31st, and that's the role that QuickBooks Full Service Payroll has taken on as part of these Core, Premium, and Elite subscriptions, is they are taking on that role of submitting those W-2s for you and your client, and you don't even need to send them to the state. So all of that is done for you electronically. The next thing that I want to look at is the basic payroll reports. So once we've been working in QuickBooks throughout the year, we've been helping our clients with employee information and entering, then sometimes we want to go through and we need to provide them some basic payroll reports. And there's several good ones. And so I want to point out a couple of my favorites so that way you have them maybe even starred, because whenever we're thinking about reports, we can always star them so that way they show up in our favorites. Or we could even do a few things to make sure that we can customize them to some of these to criteria that could be saved. But the reports that I really want to point out is the payroll billing summary, the payroll deductions and contributions. So this is going to show any payments that maybe your employees have needed to make throughout the years to garnishments, that would be part of that, and then any contributions, insurance or whatnot. And then also the payroll details. So this is going to get drilled down into specific details, and then also the payroll tax payments. So this is great to be able to see what has happened with the activity that's taken place inside of that QuickBooks file. And then lastly, the total payroll cost. And so all of these are fantastic reports for being able to look at the details and run these reports that are going to be critical for helping your clients at year end. So one of the other reports that's one of my favorites is this payroll summary by employee report. And then also the payroll summary report. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see those two reports in action. So if I move over here and I look at my reports, I scroll all the way down to payroll. And then down here, this report, I would say that's definitely worth starring. And then also this one right here. So both of these are really great reports. And let's go look to see what information is located on them. So I'm starting with the payroll summary by employee report. And the reason that this payroll report is so powerful is I can say my last date, or I can even look at the last quarter, or even the last year, or this year, and then I can say I want to include active and inactive employees. Why that's so important is sometimes whenever you go to run a report for audit purposes and you say only active, you've missed some of the activity that's happening. So you might want to say all employees. And then you can say run report. And this is going to give you a breakdown of all the employees of all of the wages throughout the year. And so you can then see even your net pay. So all of these details are really, really interesting and important, because whenever you're processing payroll for the year, you really need to make sure that you have everything accurate before that W-2. So you could actually open up that hyperlink and you can see here's all of the various payrolls that have taken place to make up that summary report. So all of these are numbers that can be drilled down into. I'm going to go back over to the other report. And since I started, it's up here at the top. I can go over directly into the payroll summary. And this is not by employee, so it's going to change the look of the report. Again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say this year, all employees, run report. And then here I can see, here's the details of all of the activity that happened, but it's a summary that's going to give me the data down here that I need. So instead of having my employees across the top, I've got pieces of information that might be useful that I need to know in order to pull in some of these details. Maybe I just want to know the total hours worked, and I can pull in a particular quarter. And so those are nice reports to be able to help with your client whenever they're thinking about payroll reports. Another thing that we need to look at is accounting preferences. So the reason that accounting preferences are so important is that this really helps us to be able to create an experience that is designed for our client. So there sometimes are some more than just the basic needs, and they really want to have
Hold on, Liz, we lost you. Last I heard was basic needs. Not yet. Still can't hear you. Okay. Now.
Yay. Okay. All right. So let me rehash that just a little bit. So accounting preferences, this is where the details are going to live that you can edit and make some one-off decisions for your clients that maybe they are outside of the basic setup needs, and they really need to have some specific details and preferences set up to meet their criteria. And so whenever we think about what are we going to do whenever we have these accounting preferences and options, we can go over into our payroll settings. So again, that's located in the gear icon, choose payroll settings, and then we can open up the accounting preferences, and then we can see a drop down of all of the different areas that we can edit. So the more options that you have started to go through and edit, the more things that you're going to see visible. And so one of the things that we're going to focus on is our wage expenses, editing those, and then also class tracking. So those are going to be two areas that we're going to focus on. So whenever we think about the payroll settings with core, premium, and elite subscriptions, there's several different things that we can edit within those. We can edit the pay wage expense accounts. So if you're thinking about, you might have different departments, different offices, and they need to have different expense accounts, then you could actually specify that. And then company contribution expense accounts, we can actually change those as needed. And then also the tax expense accounts, so that way we can specify where the employer taxes are actually being directed. And then the payroll liabilities account, and then also garnishments, and then class tracking. So we're going to look at a couple of those different features. And then also in this section, we're going to talk about some of our health benefits and retirement plans. So that's going to be all part of this payroll training today that we're going to be moving through. So if we want to edit our wage expense accounts, the way that we're going to do that is, again, going up to that gear icon and then choosing the payroll settings, and then moving through the training and saying, okay, maybe I want to change my expense account because I have different kinds of wages, like I was talking about the different departments. And here's a nice example of what that could look like. You could come through here and you could say, I have construction wages, and then I have somebody who's really an office worker. And so you could go through and you can specify which types of jobs do those people do, so that way their wages are expensed according to your business. The other thing that you could do is you actually could say maybe you want to edit the wage account. So if you came through here and you said, I have different types of wages, and so this is just showing you more of that drop down list, so you could see that you can edit each of these different sections. And then the other thing that you can do is wage type accounts. So I am making a note because that was a little bit of a duplicate slide there. So the other thing that you can do is payroll wage type accounts. So here, this would be where you would choose from one of these three options how you want your wages to be categorized. And if you think about, maybe you have some people that are salary and you just want to be able to see that on your profit and loss, and you want to have those details where you have those each individual accounts, you can do so. You just need to make sure that you have set those up so whenever you come over here into payroll settings, you can select them from the drop down. So you do want to set those up first and then come over here and choose them. Otherwise, the default setting is that all my employees' wages are posted to one expense account. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's just how detailed of a report do your clients need. Another thing that you can do is you can actually edit your payroll tax expense accounts. So the thing that you can do here is if you decide you don't want to use the default, then you can choose that you want the employer taxes and where those expenses have been paid are mapped to the chart of accounts. So you could go through and you can say, I have different types of expense accounts, and that's going to not only categorize those and break those down, but then also be visible on your payroll reports. And then the other thing that you can do is something that's kind of a lesser known feature. Not everybody realizes that this is here, but this is a fantastic feature. So you can actually class track your employees. So the way to set that up is to make sure that you have classes turned on inside of your payroll, or inside of your QuickBooks accounting subscription. So you're going to first need to go up to accounting and make sure that you've got classes turned on for tracking. And then now you can utilize those. You want to go ahead and set up some different names for those classes. And then you can go back over into your payroll settings and you can say, I use different classes for different types of payroll, or you can assign all of the payroll to one class. But a drop down will be generated if you say, I want to use different classes for different employees. And here you can say which different class each of those employees are associated with. And then automatically, whenever you process payroll, those classes are going to be assigned to those various employees. So it's very automated. Once you choose which class to track, every single time that there's a payroll run, that class will be associated with that employee. And you can only have one class for each employee. So if they do multiple different things, I would still say that you need to go in and make some type of, maybe you make a $0 transaction where you would move dollars out from one class to another. Like maybe you had somebody who is a landscaping business and normally they have landscapers, but maybe on this one particular day, maybe they had the office crew come in and they help. So in that scenario, you would maybe want to move those dollars if you wanted to create an accurate report. So I'm going to share my screen again and show you what I'm looking at here. So I'm going to start back on my dashboard and then choose my gear icon. I'm going to go navigate to payroll settings. And then here I'm going to show you those various different areas that we were talking about previously. So whenever I'm thinking about my accounting preferences, I'm going to first choose accounting, and then now you can see I have several different options here. So if I wanted to change my wage expense accounts, I could actually come through here. In this scenario, I've said that each employee's wages are posted to their own expense account. Or I could come through here and I could say all of my employees' wages are posted to one expense account. So I could use the default there if I wanted to. And I have all of the different accounts that I could choose from here on my drop-down list. Or I can go back and I can say that I'm happy with that setting. And then I could move down and I could say, maybe I wanted to change my company contributions, how it's mapped, or the employer tax settings. So here again, I have the same choice to go through and edit each of these additional areas, and then also the class tracking. But before I look at the class tracking, the thing I want to point out is that you do need to have class tracking turned on. So you're going to come over here first and verify that you have class tracking turned on. So gear icon, account and settings, and then make sure that you've got class tracking turned on. And sorry, there's a little bit delay there. And then that way you can see, here's my classes, and yes, I can turn those on and I can use them. And then if I wanted to edit my list.
We're seeing your wrong screen. I see your demo slide. I see you.
Oh, well, that stinks because I was doing such a nice job of demoing the wrong thing. Huh. On the wrong screen. Here we go. Let's change that because that stinks. I really want everybody to be able to see what I was doing. So what I was talking about was being able to see the payroll settings and being able to edit these. So if I choose my payroll settings from my gear icon, I go all the way down to accounting, and here's where I was talking about and not demoing the wage expense accounts. So here's where I was saying you can choose that each employee's wages can be posted to their own expense account. So I could change these, I could edit it as needed, or I could say, hey, I'm really happy with that. And then you can also see I have options for changing the employer taxes. I can even remap liabilities. And then the class tracking, that was the part that I really wanted to go back to make sure that if you want to use class tracking, that first there is the criteria that you have to turn it on. So back over to my gear icon, choose account and settings, navigate down here to advanced, and verify that I've got class tracking on. And I could even go and look at my list for my classes by going back to my gear icon, choosing all lists, and looking at my classes, and I can see what do I have active for my class lists. And then that will let me come back over to my payroll settings and choose to go back into accounting preferences. And now I can say that I want to use class tracking, and I could turn it off. I don't use classes for payroll, or I could say, yes, I do use classes, and in fact, I use different classes. So I could assign different employees to different classes. But like I was saying before, you can see here, there's just one per employee. So it's a really nice feature, and it happens automatically for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back over into the slides and look at our next section that we're going to be going through. So this is going to be talking about adjusting tax settings. We're going to go ahead and look at how do I make some edits? How do I tweak things? What do I do if I need to make a change? And what would be some of the reasons for those changes? And it's often that states are going to have a different SUTA rate or SUI rate, however you want to say it. The state unemployment insurance rate is going to change sometimes annually. And so you need to make sure that it's up to date inside of your QuickBooks file to calculate your payroll correctly. So in order to be able to do that, you want to make sure that you've got that notice that is going to be probably snail mailed to your client, and then they need to share that with you. So usually around the end of the year, I start asking my clients, Did you get that piece of mail? And could you forward that to me? Because that really is the thing that you need in order to understand what the rate is. Otherwise, you could go log in and you could go check that yourself directly on the liability website. And then the other thing that you can do is you can change your schedules. So say that your federal schedule changed from being somebody who pays quarterly to somebody who pays monthly, or possibly you're somebody who's monthly that now needs to pay semi-weekly. So you have several different options there. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, and I'm going to show you what that looks like and choose the right screen to demo. And I'm going to say that we want to come over here and go back from our gear icon into our payroll settings. And then we want to change our state tax. So I'm going to click that pencil. And then you're going to see I have a screen that pops up and I can change any information that I need to. So typically your ID number doesn't change, but down here your rates do. So you could just say, hey, I need to add a new rate. And then you could enter that with an effective date. So even if I said my 2020 rate is 3.4, but my 2021 rate is going to be 320, it's not going to take effect until the new rate, until the new year. So you can go ahead and enter those things prior to the year ending. The other thing that we were talking about is editing your federal schedule. So I can come down here and click on change or add new schedule. And then I can just decide that I am now a semi-weekly and it will start, whatever date. So I could put that in there and I can say, okay. And it's telling me that I can change that. And so now it's done. So several different options that you are able to make and changes that you're able to make yourself based on just the needs of the client. And those needs can just be changing. They're ever changing. As they get more payroll, they're going to have to pay their liabilities more often. So that would be the reason for a change in the schedule. So when we're thinking about the various different options inside of payroll, one of the things that we have is the ability to track time off policies and accrual rates. This is fabulous for those employers who are offering those benefits. They have a way to be able to track that inside of QuickBooks Online Payroll. So the setup is inside of QuickBooks and it's very simple to do. And we're going to go through some of those steps on how to use it and keep track of employee time off. So there's some basic understanding of how the time off works and then also the paid and unpaid time. So you have several different options whenever you're thinking about time off policies. So you can track an employee's accrual rates and times for those paid and unpaid time offs, as well as for sick leave and vacation. And so one of the things that you might be asked is, what about vacation accruals? And so how does that get calculated? And it's based on an hourly accrual rate that we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up here in a second. And then also any type of state laws and rules that are in place, you also have to abide by those. And so you'll have some notifications to make sure that that's happening too. So we're going to go ahead and look at, we have a paid and unpaid time off policy. So maybe we have a new employee and we have lots of different things that we can do for them. So we can set up several different types of time off policies, which include sick, vacation paid, and that not as often used unpaid time off. And the unpaid time off is really great for being able to say, I'm going to allow you to take a week of paid time off, but if you want to take 2 weeks, well, you can, but that second week is not going to be paid. So you can still track those. There's several employers who want to do that. And then how do the accrual rates get calculated? So if we think about the new year, QuickBooks Online Payroll is going to calculate those hours and carry over into the new year if that's something that you have put up. there's also going to be some limits. So hours worked, whenever you hit those thresholds, even if you start a new year, you have the option to say, I'm going to dump all those hours, it's use or lose kind of scenario, or those are going to carry over. But the thing that will happen automatically is those hours are just going to be carried over unless there's a change that you need to make or want to make. And then that higher anniversary date, that really is all about that first paycheck, and then each anniversary check is how some of those are going to be calculated on that annual basis. So for example, say that you have 40 hours earned, and then you want to know how do those accrual rates work. Here's just a schedule that would tell you, here's some calculations in order to be able to figure out what are those rates going to be, and what would be the end results in having time off, and being able to tell your employee how much time they can take. The next thing that you can look at is sometimes people say, I'm going to give my employees unlimited time off. And so in these kinds of scenarios, you're not saying there's a max amount of time. So maybe in several employer situations, there's going to be a max of a week off or a max of 2 weeks off. But what if you have an employer who says, I want to just have it unlimited? You know, maybe they don't take it this year. Maybe they're going to take it 4 years from now because they're planning a great big family trip to Hawaii and they need a bunch of time for that. Or possibly, 2 years from now, they've got it scheduled that they're going to have a full hip replacement and they need all the time off at one blast. So you could put in there how you want to have your time off to be calculated and tracked. And I'm going to go ahead and demo what that looks like whenever looking at the live product. So we're going to go back over here into payroll. We're going to go over into our employees because this is where it starts. So we could come down here and we can pick on one of these employees. Use the pencil icon to edit these time off. So how is this person going to be paid? So how much do you pay this person? Here's the salary, but then there's additional pay types. And that's exactly where we're going to go for this next piece. So we can say paid time off, and then we can start entering in some details. And we could even say we want to create a new paid time off policy. And we want to begin of the year, or we could say that on the anniversary date. And so this is that setting where I was saying you have some flexibility. And then how are hours accrued? You could say unlimited if you wanted to. Easy done. Or you could say on the anniversary date, and you could put in the hours, or you could say at the beginning of every single year. And then you can put in here, so how many hours per year is that employee going to be able to earn towards a maximum hour of 40 hours, or however, whatever you want to put in there as your maximum amount earned. The other thing is you can do the exact same thing with the unpaid time off. You can do the same thing with sick pay. You can say unlimited. You can create a new sick pay schedule, and the same thing for vacation pay. So all of these have lots of different options. This is one that I went ahead and I set up to be able to say 0.8 hours worked is going to be able to give them a max of 200 hours. And then you can even, at the start of tracking this, you could even say, maybe they're migrating from another payroll, and you're going to say, I'm going to plop in their hours, that maybe they had 75 hours already. And so that's going to help to calculate where the max that they're going to hit of that 200 hours. So lots of different types of options here whenever you are paying. And then I can come back here and I can just say unlimited for that one. And then done. So what I have found is that employers don't really know how to track that time off. They don't really understand how easy it can be. And so sometimes they really want to offer that. I mean, if you think about the ways that you keep employees, some of them are by offering them these various benefits. And one of those benefits that's very attractive is paid time off. And it doesn't have to be a lot. You can just say it's 20 hours. Well, that's a way of saying thank you. It's a way of saying, I don't want you to get burned out. I want you to have a moment away. So, even with different types of employers, it doesn't have to be big dollars. You don't have to do a lot in order to be able to be offering something that's very attractive to employees. So the next area that we're going to talk about is the lesson that covers deductions and contributions. And so this is really important whenever we're thinking about staying compliant with our employees. There are some scenarios where they have deductions that might be stated by some type of legal situation, or it's a garnishment based on child support. So there's lots of different reasons that you might have some type of garnishment or deduction. And then also on the flip side of that, sometimes they might need contributions. And so it's very common for there to be both a deduction and a contribution whenever you're talking about benefits. So insurance is one of those. You might say to your employee, I'm going to offer insurance, but I'm not going to pay for it 100%. There is an employee piece of it that is due. And so that would be the part where they would go in and they would pay their portion. Maybe you tell them, I'm going to cover you, the employee, but your, maybe 5 other family members you need to cover. So lots of different options there. But garnishments, if we think about the differences here, garnishments are going to be those things that they're going to be stated usually by some type of authority. And you must be compliant with that. So employers must file these properly and record and pay on time, because there are penalties that are associated with not being compliant with garnishments. So the other thing is these deductions. So there might be a voluntary deduction that they might say, I want to have an additional amount of money taken out of my paycheck every month for a savings account. And all of those things can be done. The other thing is whenever we're thinking about deductions and contributions, there's also 401s. So retirement packages. There's several companies, again, on a small level, they can contribute. And these are things that do tether employees to workers. Employers need a way to maintain the workforce. You want to be an attractive employer to retain and attract employees. Turnover, remember, is the thing that costs, not some of these benefits. So whenever you're thinking about a garnishment, so of course this is a court-ordered document that's going to be issued to you, and usually it's something that's mailed directly to the employee and the employer. Oftentimes, if they have both sets of information, they're going to send it both places, and that your role is usually to just help them walk through how to set that up. And so you're going to go through and you're going to add a new deduction, and there's several pieces of information that you're going to enter. And so what type of deduction is this, or contribution is this? So all of those things are details that you're going to put in. And then there's some really nice reports to view to be able to see those employer deductions and contributions. So you can see right here, one of those reports that I really like, the payroll summary by employee, that's actually going to show all of those deductions and contributions. And then also there is a really cool report, the deductions and contributions report, easily named, to be able to track exactly that. So if we think about how exactly do you set that up, we're going to go ahead and look at that live because I think it's fun. And then we're going to also look at the workers' compensation. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and look at how do you set up these garnishments. So we're going to go back over into our payroll center and go directly into our employees. And I just happen to know that Greg has already got one. So I'm going to pick on him for a second. And scroll down here, and I'm going to go ahead and look at his deductions. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say he has a brand new garnishment that has came through, and maybe it's for child support. I'm going to now add some details here, and this is going to be the way that it's going to appear on the check, on the pay stub, and even on your chart of accounts. So I might want to say that this is going to be George, child 1. Maybe he's got multiple children. We need to have multiple garnishments set up for different scenarios. But we can put in here that he is to pay $125 with a maximum of 40% of the disposable income that is going to be part of his garnishment. So now that is done, that's set up. And so every single time that payroll is run, now he's going to have that deduction taken out. If it ever needs to be edited, you could come through here and with the pencil icon, you can edit it. The opposite is true for a contribution with a deduction. So I'm going to go ahead and do that from start because it's a little fun to see. And so if I come down here, it says add new deductions. That is kind of misleading because really what we're doing is a deduction and contribution. So we're going to go ahead and say we're going to choose a new deduction or contribution. We could come through here and we could say whatever it is. So we could say it's health insurance, or this is where we could put in our retirement programs or some of the other deductions, but I'm just going to keep it easy and I'm going to say that this is health insurance. And I'm going to go ahead and call it dental because I think we already have a medical insurance for this one. And then I can put in here what is the provider's name, and I'm just going to keep it easy. So dental insurance is the way that we're going to have it up here. And then I can choose a dollar amount or a percentage. So I'm going to say that it's just a set amount of, let's call it $75 per pay period. And then I could end it at that. I could say that my employee is responsible for paying all, so 75%. And there is no company contributions. Or I could change my mind and I can say, all right, the employee is responsible for paying $45 and the employer is going to pay for $30. And then I can even put an annual maximum amount, which makes sense because at some point this is going to have a cap. So whatever that amount, you could put that in and then I can make the decision, is it pre-tax or is it taxable? And boom, it's set up, it's done. And so the next time that I went to go process payroll for George, I could actually process payroll for him and then I can see those deductions that are set up. And I think George is every Friday, and I can come through here and I can say, I play with this account a lot, so I keep on creating. Apparently, I pick on George a lot. I can say I want to create this payroll check, and I could look at all of the details. So here are my company paid contributions. And then where are my employee deductions? And so I can see all three things here. George's child support, I can see the insurance, and I can see the dental insurance. So these are all things that are visible and can be edited before I process payroll. But once payroll is submitted, then I can actually come over here and I can pull up some reports. And this is where it's really nice to be able to say, I want to scroll down to my payroll section of the reports center, and I want to click on that payroll deductions and contributions. And remember, if I star this here, that doesn't mean that it stars it on my client's QuickBooks. So they would still need to star it in their books in order for it to be a favorite of theirs as well. And I can go ahead and click it. And choose my criteria. And then I can say that I just want to see child support. So I could just look at this one and it would tell me for the entire year what's been paid. I could even click into the details and I could see how many different times did George pay child support, or I could look at all. And so lots of different pieces of information that can be viewed and accessed and seen here. So, you know, lots of various ways to be able to drill down into the details and see when were all of the dates of all of those contributions. So for Greg has a child support, because I can see here child support for Greg, and there was several times throughout the year that he had 5 different payments throughout the year that totaled the $250. Really nice bird's eye view. But then again, there's that report that I like so much. So the payroll summary by employee, if I pull that one up, I can actually see the same data. And I could say, I could look at this entire year. And then here, I could actually look at, here's my employees. And I can scroll down and I can see where's my contributions and deductions for these employees. Was it pre-tax? Was it post-tax? And then what were the contributions from the employer? So down here I can see here's the dollars that I said the company would pay. So lots of good reports, and again, you can zero down on just a particular employee and see these things as well. I like, this is one of my favorites, the payroll summary by employee report. That's a good one. All right, so I'm going to go back to my dashboard and back over into my slides and talk about the workers' compensation. This is also really key for being able to keep track of data for your employees. So whenever I'm thinking about being able to pay workers' comp, one of the things that you can do is you can actually set up your workers' comp to be part of your QuickBooks. And so that is actually powered by a partner program, and it will actually deduct dollars as you go. So if you want to learn more about that workers' compensation, you can actually find details about that, not only on the Intuit QuickBooks Online Payroll subscription options page, landing page, but also inside of your QuickBooks, you're going to have some information about the workers' comp. If you have it as something that is not part of the integrated solution, then you would just need to record it as an expense. Otherwise, this integration here will deduct it as needed on an ongoing basis. So more reports. So we're now talking about more advanced features. And so we want to think about some more advanced reports. And with those reports, they're going to give us details that maybe our client is really looking for. So we've taught them about maybe some basic reports, and now we're ready to show them some more things, maybe like job costing. And so where that's going to all start for an employee is the time card. So whenever we're thinking about how do we get payroll job costing, well, it's going to be on the time card, time entry level. And so there's different options here whenever you're putting in the details for time worked that's going to be associated with a particular project or customer or sub-customer. We've got to tag that time somehow in order to be able to have it part of the expense reporting. So here we've got a timesheet that's pulled up. It's for a particular employee. We have a specific date range that's generated. And then we can also go through and we can say what are the different details and hours worked, and then what is the job that's associated with that. And then we can see that whenever the timesheets are approved, that when we go to process payroll, that we've got those dollars that are actually already allocated to those different jobs or those projects or the customers or sub-customers. So all of that is something that can be tracked. The other option that we have that I like, yay, is TSheets. And so whenever we're thinking about, I'm a believer in empowering my clients to have the best data possible and how to use all of the resources available to them. And so TSheets is very easy to use. Again, it's an app that you can have on your phone so your employees clock in. And it doesn't matter if it's a service-based business or it's a, maybe you've got some actual things that are going to be associated with particular costs, but part of the cost is the payroll. You need to track those details. And so if you've got several different types of projects that are going on, you can actually allocate those dollars. Whenever that employee clocks in, they're going to say, my time was allocated to a particular assignment or task. And then whenever you go to look at, easy to see all of that payroll job costing inside of the projects area. So we're going to look at a couple of different options here. If you're somebody who is using projects, because they're pretty awesome. So if you're somebody who's using projects, there are some simple to use reports. And one of those reports that we're going to look at is being able to see all of the payroll cost. So we've got some payroll details that are available to be seen inside of the project area. And we're going to go over here and look at this live so I can kind of walk you through some of these things that are available, and then we're going to go see them. And then the other thing that we're going to look at is, what if you decide that you want to do a payroll project profit and loss report? So yes, you can still do it on the customer sub-customer level, and you can still see all of the expenses associated with that particular customer. And you can see all of the profitability for that sub-customer level. So it includes all of the payroll. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, because what we had is, we can say that we have some time that needs to be entered. And we can actually come through here. So it's asking, hey, do you want to use your TSheets account? But I'm going to go ahead and just do this because it's going to be the easiest thing for us to go ahead and enter. So I could go through and I can say, here's my project that I'm working on. I can put in any type of description that I wanted to, and then I can put in some hours right here. And then I could change hours. So I've got George that's got projects. And if you're using one day, clock in and out of several different projects, where here it is a little bit more time consuming and tedious if I came down here and I said, well, this day they were also working and it was regular pay or some type of variable pay, and then I had 3 hours here and then 2 hours here and no hours there. So, you know, you can see that you can make some edits, but really TSheets makes it where it's so much simpler. I can save and close this timesheet. I can go over into my projects, and I want to point a couple of things out. So whenever I'm looking at projects, I've got my green bar that shows my money coming in, my blue bar that shows money going out, so my cost. If I go and I click on one of these projects, you can see here's my income that's came in and here's my cost. That kind of makes sense for this particular client. And part of the cost are those payroll costs. So here's those dollars that are associated with that particular project. So I can see what these are paychecks. And I really want to stop and point that out. Those hours that I entered that are on a timesheet, but they have not been processed yet, are not going to show up as part of the payroll cost. You must process payroll first, and it must be a posting transaction in order to be able to get reports that are going to show those allocated dollars that are going towards each of those different projects. So I just want to make sure I pointed that out, that hours that have not been processed through payroll yet are not going to show here. The other option is we could still go back over to our reports and we could still run our standard profit and loss by customer reports. And here we would be able to say, let's do there to here, and make sure we get some data. Because again, this is kind of a dummy account. And then we can come through and we can see what dollars were earmarked for whatever particular customer. And then if I wanted to customize it, I could say building A is the only thing that I want to view. So I went up to customize report, and then I want to filter down and maybe to my customer, and I want to say that it's just going to be my building A. So right there. And that's the only thing that I want to have visible. I must have had this one too. Or that's my parent customer, sorry. And this is my sub customer, so my project that I'm actually working on. This, I think, is messier. I think it's a little more difficult to get down to teach your clients. One of the things I do is I do rename this area, so I tell them some tips on how to move around. But it is much easier, much convenient more convenient to come over here to projects and be able to see these details quickly and fast. The other thing, even if I haven't posted all my time yet, I can actually come through here and I can see here's all the different time entries. So here's all of the different time that was spent for that particular project by employee or by service. So lots of details that you can get on the project level whenever we're talking about job costing, and even on the profit and loss report whenever we're talking about customers and sub-customers. Okay, folks, so we have another poll. So the poll, which actions do you need to take to allocate payroll expenses to projects? So do you need to run a payroll on the same day every week? Use weekly timesheets with or without TSheets to assign time to a project? Or do you need to turn on auto payroll? All right, so I'm hoping that everybody got that one right because we just went through some of it. But if not, I'm going to go ahead and count you down. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Remember, you're not graded on this. It's just kind of testing your knowledge. So the thing that you are going to be able to do to allocate those expenses is to use weekly timesheets or your time tracking with or without TSheets to assign it to that project or customer. So that is exactly what you're going to do in order to be able to see those profitability reports. So we are really moving along the training here, and now we're going to start talking about some of these advanced payroll reports that are going to be part of our lesson that is really some of our the details and the nitty-gritty of being able to provide some really good services for our clients. So when we're thinking about our clients and the things that they need to be able to do, some of the times they need to be able to track their expenses by classes. So one of those things that we were talking about earlier is being able to include payroll classes. Whenever we are processing payroll, we want to be able to have that visibility. So we're going to look at that report because we've already set up the classes. And then if we want to go and look at that profit and loss by class, we're going to be able to see all of those dollars allocated to each of the classes that we set up. So we're going to go look at that. And then we're also going to look at the total payroll cost report. So that's another good report to look at. And then the other thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at workers' comp report. Now this one is one that I'm going to show you a trick on how to capture these details. So like I was saying earlier, if you're using the built-in feature inside of QuickBooks to be able to use the workers' comp partnered program, then you're going to automatically have some of these things happen for you. But if you are not, if you're somebody who you're using an outside party to pay for workers' comp, you can still track it. So I'm going to show you some tips here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And the thing that I want to start with is we set up earlier our class tracking. So now we're going to look at our class tracking for payroll. So we've ran some payroll for employees that were allocated to specific classes, and now we can see them here. So I can see how many dollars have been associated with construction wages, and I can see by class level construction wages for commercial and construction wages for residential. So this is really helpful information for being able to say how profitable was I in that area if I'm also tracking income there. So in this particular scenario, I would say you definitely want to have some income that goes along with those expenses. So that way you can come down here and see your profitability based on class. So this is a really nice report. The other thing that we're going to look at is the total cost report. So again, I'm going to scroll down here to my payroll reports, and I'm going to look at my payroll total cost. And if you ever have any questions about what these reports do, see this little question mark on the side? You can always open it up, and so you can see what exactly does this do. And it tells you all costs associated with paying your employee, including total pay, net pay, deductions, and taxes. So, yep, total pay. So I can come over here and run that report. And I can see, let's just use the date range of the last paycheck, and I can say all classes, and I can look at all of these details here. So nice report to be able to see the necessary information. Now, the next thing I want to show you is kind of a nice little nugget of information. So say that I need to produce some workers' comp reports. The way to be able to do that is to go over into the employee card, go over and edit one of them. Let's edit Dan. I can actually come over here and I can see I've already entered one, but I could put in their workers' comp class code. This is different than the class tracking that is part of the income and expenses in QuickBooks. This is truly the workers' comp class code. So you can get this code directly from your workers' comp provider, or you can go and search the web. There's lots of different options to get that code, but you can put that in here. So now every single time that there's a payroll run for this particular employee, Dan, then I'm going to be able to see that that 3200 workers' comp class is associated with his payroll dollars. So if I come over here and I look at my reports and I want to go back over into, really we can choose any of those reports, but let's go ahead and scroll down here to this report, workers' compensation report. So here we can actually do some cool stuff to filter this down. So we can say, I actually want to see everything this year. And I can say, I want to see all classes, and I can run the report. Okay, well, this is going to give me the total dollars for each of those workers' comp codes that I've plugged in. I could, because audits are on weird date ranges, I could actually customize the date range and make it compatible with what my audit period is. And then if I wanted to drill down into those dollars, I could actually see who makes up those dollars. And so here's the people that are associated with those dollars. And then if I wanted to go back, I could actually do another thing where I could say, all right, let's just look at 32200. And here I can actually see the wages paid, and I can see those dollars for just that workers' comp class code. So this is a really nice report to be able to see the dollars and the people that are associated with those dollars. Again, this report, you just kind of have to play with those numbers and enter them in. I'd say that this is not something that you can go back and edit those numbers later on. They're just a field that you enter with the employee card as needed. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen again. And I'm going to go through the last section. So you've made it all the way through part 1 and part 2, hopefully. And you're now with me on this last section. So lesson number 8 is all about tips and gratuities. So there are times whenever you're going to have maybe an art and craft store and somebody gets tipped, or a restaurant is going to be the most common. But there's lots of different stores that might want to tip the employees. Well, the employers can be have a hard time of tracking those dollars, but you can show them that there actually is a feature inside of QuickBooks that's going to allow them to do payroll tips or cash tips. So they have options here. So whenever we're thinking about payroll tips, we are thinking about tips that are going to go either on the paycheck, or they're going to be cash tips that were given. So in this scenario, we're going to say the tips are going to be put on the paycheck. So we're going to go through, and we first need to set that up as a payment type for that employee. So you can see I'm editing again the employee and selecting from this drop down additional pay types and choosing payroll tips. And then the next thing that I can do is I can on the payroll run, I can plug in those dollars that are associated with those paycheck tips. So very simple to use. The other option is cash tips. So cash tips are going to be dollars that go out the day of service. But you still need to capture those dollars. You still need to capture those dollars for being able to track inside of payroll. So it can happen sometimes that there's more cash tips than there are payroll allocated dollars. And so just in case you're wondering, yes, QuickBooks does store that information. So that way the next time that there's another payroll run, it'll pull those dollars from it. So the liabilities are affected by those cash tips. I'd keep an eye on them. The thing I want to tell you is you're ready for the next steps. You're ready for making sure that you've gone over into your payroll training and that you've gone through it, that you make sure that you're taking advantage of your Pro Advisor benefit, which is a free payroll account and a free TSheets account. So you get a free premium QuickBooks Online Payroll account that includes TSheets. If you are somebody who's been using payroll for a while and you don't see the new premium offering just yet, it's kind of being rolled out in realms. And so just hang tight, it'll come to you soon. I also want to launch one more poll because I want to know, how likely are you to recommend this training to a peer or colleague? So I'll give you a minute to answer that. All right, well, hopefully you enjoyed your time here, and so hopefully the answer is very likely. There's lots to learn, and I know that we moved through quite a bit rather quickly. Here are the results to that. And then the last thing I want to say is thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me for either part 1 and part 2 today, or that you have and hopefully go back and you can take part 1. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the QuickBooks community. And I hope you have really great payroll adventures. Bye.